everyone. This is Bethany with Craft with Bethany, and it is time for another Sewing Help Hotline question and for me to answer it. All right, so this week's call in from the Sewing Help Hotline is from Maureen in Virginia, so we're going to play that in just a second. But if you are unfamiliar with what the Sewing Help Hotline is, this is a free, toll-free hotline that you can call anytime, 24/7. Leave me a voicemail with your sewing question, and I will respond with a YouTube video like this, answering your question, so I can show you what to do, or we can talk about it face to face. It makes it a little more personal. You get to hear your voicemail, and it might be a question that someone else has, so it can help you and another person. So let's listen to this week's phone call and see what we're going to be answering. All right?
Hello, Bethany. This is Maureen from Virginia, and I was wondering if you could do a beginner's guide to FPP, like a 101 tutorial on how to get started on foundation paper piecing. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your response.
All right, so Maureen, thank you so much for calling in. She was actually at the Liza Handmade bag making retreat that I was at up in Minnesota. No, Wisconsin. Why do I keep saying Minnesota? I don't know. I'm getting them mixed up. It's Wisconsin. I was in Wisconsin for the bag making retreat. Maureen was there. I did do a foundation paper piecing, or as she called FPP for short, project. We didn't get to do the whole project together, but we did get to do kind of a quick rush through of the foundation paper piecing. And what that is basically a technique for piecing fabric together or stitching fabric together in a certain pattern and order so that you can create some very detailed and intricate designs. It is something that I became hyper obsessed with about a year ago, and I have done so much of it, and I love it so much, and I have books on it, and it's just something that I'm obsessed with. So I was really excited to get to teach it at this bag making retreat and show how you can incorporate it in other types of sewing, not just quilting or not just home decor or whatever. You could do it in a lot of different things. So we had a great retreat and we had a great time. But Maureen was like, I kind of caught the bug, which several people caught the FPP bug, and at the retreat, and they were like, I get why you like it so much. So I kind of describe it as like paint by numbers, but for sewing. So it's sew by numbers. And so she's like, you walked us through it great, but I don't know if I could do this again, like in a couple of weeks when I pick it back up and try it again without your guidance. And so that's kind of why she called in and said, can you please give us a little one-on-one step-by-step tutorial? Because what I've found is a lot of foundation paper piecing patterns out there don't show you how to like do it. They just tell you the order to like piece all the blocks into, but they don't tell you how to make the blocks. And it's kind of like something you need to know. And honestly, I learned because someone I know in my sewing club showed me how to do it, and I caught on really quick. Now, I will say, foundation paper piecing isn't for everybody. Some people catch on a little faster than others. It just depends on which way your brain works. It doesn't mean that you can't figure it out. It's just some people it takes a little longer. And you'll understand what I mean by that if you've never tried it before or seen it, because you kind of flip it back and forth and you're sewing through paper. I do have right here on my desk the paper pieced quilt blocks. It's the Wonderful World of Paper Pieced Quilt Blocks, 30 nature-inspired designs and beautiful sampler projects. This is by Liza Taylor with Liza Taylor Handmade on Instagram, or LizaTaylorHandmade.com. This book she came out with earlier this fall, and there are so many different patterns and designs in here. And look at the little ladybug. But she also has projects in the back, and you can photocopy these to be able to make all of these. But she has beautiful projects back here of how to like piece all these different designs together. So she's going with more of the quilting approach, but she also has projects on her website like aprons and oven mitts and like home decor things or wall hangings or different ways, bags and baskets and everything. So highly recommend checking out her book. I will link it in the description below. You guys have probably seen me talk about it before because it is so good. And she also has a membership club. So if you really do get into foundation paper piecing and you're like, okay, I feel like I can do this. I want to do more. I want to challenge myself more. And she's got some great beginner patterns, but she will work you up to some more challenging ones. But she's got a great membership. I think it's $12 a month or something. But you get a free pattern every month, and you have a great membership community of people that are doing it with you, challenges, giveaways. They do live sew-alongs. They usually have special guests, and there's usually a project that's included with the pattern. So she does a lot. And it's a wonderful resource, especially if you're getting into it. I'm in that membership, and I don't get to do it every month because I'm so busy, but I love being involved and seeing everybody else's makes. So, all right, so let's dive into foundation paper piecing. I'm going to go clean off this table that's a mess. That's my laundry room, so it catches all the laundry. So I'm going to go clean off my table, and we're going to sew up this foundation paper piecing. I'm going to do one of Liza's free examples, which is a little heart. So you can get this off of her website to practice with. And this is actually what I taught at the retreat. So I'm going to get that set up so that we can go over it. And then I'll show you some examples of some more bigger finished projects that I've done, so you can see those. And yeah, let's do some foundation paper piecing. Yay! Here is a close-up of what we're going to make together. This is a heart, and this is a 3-inch block, so it's small, and this is a good one to start with. This is a free pattern over on Liza Taylor Handmade's website, so you can download it and practice. And this is what the pattern looks like. So when you print it off, you're going to cut out 2 squares, an A side and a B side. And we're going to sew these up. We're going to do the first one nice and slow, walk you through my best tips and everything, and then we're going to do this one next. One thing that I want to point out, if you look closely, this one I've trimmed right to the edge of the dotted line, or just right, the dotted line is trimmed right off. And then this one's got a little bit of a gap around it. You can do either way. I do find that squaring this up and getting it nice and crisp is ideal, because eventually you're going to have to trim this off anyways, and I prefer to do that with my paper scissors and not my fabric scissors. So I'm going to trim this one down so it matches this one, and it'll make lining these up when we put these 2 halves together much easier. So for this one, I did orange in the middle and blue on the outside. So for the example I'm going to sew up with you, I'm going to do blue in the middle and orange on the outside, so they're opposing. So what I've done is I've cut some blue fabric and some orange fabric to start. I do recommend, if this is your first time or you're very new to foundation paper piecing, that you stick with solids, because they're the same on both sides. So it makes it really easy. When you start adding prints, it gets a little more challenging to make sure you're doing it right sides together at the right time. And then if you start adding directional prints, it gets even more challenging. And with angles like this, you'll never get it's really hard to get the pattern directional. So I really recommend sticking with solids and patterns that are non-directional for foundation paper piecing. Otherwise, it can just look a little confusing. So we're going to start with the A side, and I want to point out a couple things about this pattern. You'll see this on other patterns as well, but one thing I like about Liza's patterns is she kind of highlights the different sections or different color tone when you print it out. One option that you could do is write in the color for each square. So I did blue. This time I'm going to do blue on the inside and orange on the outside. So I don't get confused. I could write blue here and orange here, here, and here. Or some people will take crayons or colored pencils and color them in, because having that visual color reminds them of which fabric is going where. I highly recommend taking the time to do that as you start beginning, so you don't get confused. But let's get going. So the first thing that we want to know is we need to go in order, right? So we're doing A1, A2, A3, and then A4. So we only have 4 pieces on this pattern. Same for the B side, because they are mirrored opposites, which makes 2 halves to our heart. So we always want to start with the number 1, whatever the letter is in this section. This pattern only has 2 sections, so it keeps it very simple. But as you do bigger patterns that have more sections, you need to make them in order. And when you go through these. So we're going to start with A1, and in order to attach A1, we need to attach A2 at the same time. So like I said, we're going to do blue for the center of my heart, and I only have 1 piece on this half that's going to be blue. The other 3 corners or pieces are going to be orange because we're doing the opposite of this one. So I'm going to take my blue fabric because that's my first one, and I'm just going to lay it behind my paper. Now you'll notice that my fabric is much bigger than my paper. When you first start doing this, I highly recommend working with some larger pieces that are obviously larger than the piece that you need until you get more used to doing it and positioning. It also will make it a little easier to manage and hold and flip and all of that. So the first thing that we're going to do is make sure that the blue fabric for the center of my heart fully covers the center of my heart here, which it does. All right, so one thing to note is our fabric is always going to go on the back side of the paper, and we're going to use the front side of the paper as our stitch guide. So we're going to sew with the paper side up in the machine over here, okay? So just know that whatever we create on this side is going to be mirrored on this side because that's going to end up being the back. And that's going to be the heart, okay? So we want to attach A1 to A2 because that's the next one. So we have this line right here, and this is my trick. We are going to fold at this line. And we're going to crease it. Now I recommend laying it down to do this, but we're going to get a nice crease, and there's a nice line right here. And that crease line is our stitch line, okay? Now we want to fill this triangle. So when I place it face down, this is the triangle A2 that we want to fill. And we're going to put an orange piece there. So I've got another big piece of orange. Now in order to fill this, I need my fabric to go on the opposite side of the triangle so that when I stitch it down and flip it to the right side, it covers the triangle. So let me show you that. So here's my stitch line, here's my corner that I want to fill. I'm going to take this and I'm going to place it over the stitch line, but I'm going to place it past the stitch line. Now I did it kind of far here just to show you on camera, but we need seam allowance, right? So once we stitch across this line on this side, then we will have all of this to flip back and have this corner. Now this may not make any sense to you right now. It's totally a trust the process thing, but I've got my fabric in place. So I've got my A1 and my A2, and I'm going to sew from this corner to this corner, and I do a back stitch at both ends. A couple things to note, we do need to make some changes to our machine. So when you first turn your machine, you're going to have a straight stitch, and we're going to leave it at a center needle straight stitch. But we do need to shorten the stitch length. So we need to shorten it down to a 1.5 millimeter, 2 at the very most. And the reason we do that is the shorter stitch length is going to perforate this paper. So when it's time to take it off when we're done, it'll be a lot easier to take it off. So I've lowered my stitch length. I'm going to line up my paper, and we're going to sew across this. All right, so I've sewn across, and the next thing we want to do is trim our thread tails. You definitely want to make sure that you take the time to trim your thread tails between every stitch. You do not want these to get folded into your foundation paper piecing. And I am using a black thread so you can see it well on camera. You could use white or whatever color you want. This really shouldn't show up at the end of your foundation paper piecing because this is the front. And you don't see any of that black stitching except for on the back, which will get covered up anyway. So, all right, so we did our first stitch from corner to corner. It's okay if you go a little past that. You just don't want to go all the way to this edge. We just want to go corner to corner or a stitch or two past at the most, making sure that we back stitch at the beginning and end. All right, so before we flip our A2 piece over, we do need to trim this down. So let's go do that. Okay, so remember how the first time we folded our paper to make that crease line, we folded it so that it was fabric to fabric? Well, this time, after we've stitched a piece down, we're going to fold it paper to paper, and we are going to remove some of this excess. So I have this great ruler. It's called an add a quarter. Let me see if I can turn it around there. Add a quarter, and it's basically a wonderful ruler for foundation paper piecing. So if you decide that you really want to get into this, I highly recommend it. I'll link it in the description below. But it's got a nice little quarter inch groove right here, and this right here butts up perfectly up against the paper. So you get a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance left behind. So I'm going to trim all of this off. If you have big pieces, you can save it. If you have little pieces, toss it. All right, so I cut off my excess, and I'm going to fold this back. It's important that you do this after every time you sew a line, okay? So we folded it paper to paper, trimmed off the excess, left a 1/4 inch seam allowance of both of these. Fold this back, flip it over, and now we can reveal that corner piece, which is that orange, just like that. So that is the corner for A2. You can see the paper behind it. Yes, this fabric is way too big for it, but like I said, better to have too big than to fold this up. And if it doesn't cover all of the paper, it's not gonna work. We need to cover all of the paper, okay? So now what we're gonna do is A3. So we're gonna repeat those same steps, so we'll do it again. So the first fold we do is fabric to fabric, making our crease line for along that A3 line. So you might want to lay it down and finger press it really well. And now we have a crease line that goes across here. And we're going to take another orange piece that we have, and we're going to place it opposite of the piece that we are trying to fill. So opposite of that, making sure it covers it. Another trick to make sure that your fabric is going to cover it when it folds back to the right side is to just fold this over. If this triangle right here is still got all this fabric around it, then you're good to go. So, and there's my crease line right there, so I can make sure I have plenty of seam allowance. So I do. And I'm going to now sew from this corner to this corner across this line. Now that we've sewn our line, we're going to trim our thread tails on both sides. And what are we going to do next? We're going to fold the paper again, but this time it's paper to paper, and we're going to trim off seam allowance. So this time we're cutting off all of this, even some of the previous piece. And that's okay, because we know it's not going to be part that we need to keep. It's beyond the paper. And I need a new blade in my rotary cutter. Okay. So now that I've cut off my seam allowance, or I have my seam allowance left, I'm going to fold this back, flip it over, and reveal my other corner piece. And I'm going to do a nice finger press. If you have a more detailed piece, or if you just want to have an iron set up, I really like the Aliso mini iron for these types of foundation paper piecing projects. You can press it in between each piece to really hold in those sharp creases. All right, so now that we've got these two top corners, we really only have one more left, and that is A4 from here to here. So again, we're going to fold fabric to fabric, create our crease line, fold that open, grab our other piece of orange, line it up, do a little fit check. That's a good fit check. All right, so now that we've got that in place, we're going to go sew from this point to this point. All right, so another tip is some people like to use what's called an open toe foot instead of the all-purpose foot, because it gives you more visibility to see where the needle is going to hit, and making sure that you're staying on the line. So if you want to use an open toe foot, you absolutely can. All right, so let's trim off our thread tails. And then we'll go cut our seam allowance. this is what it's looking like so far. All right, so this is what we've got. We still haven't flipped this over. Remember, we folded fabric to fabric the first time. Now we're folding paper to paper, laying it flat, using our add a quarter ruler, or you can, some people just eyeball this. You can use a regular ruler. It's totally up to you. We're gonna cut off our seam allowance, fold the paper back, flip it over, and fold this back to reveal that other corner. And we're just gonna give it a nice finger press all the way around. So that's what we have. Now that doesn't quite look like a heart yet because we have all this extra fabric. And so now that we've kind of pressed everything, the next thing we want to do to finish this piece of our puzzle, our foundation paper piece puzzle, is to trim off all the excess around the box. So in order to do that, we're going to leave this nice and flat. We've got it nice and pressed, and we're going to take our ruler, flip it over, line it up with the edge of our paper, and we're going to trim off all of the excess. This is why I said it's so important that your original paper piece is squared up so that when you go to do this, it becomes squared up to that paper piece. So never during the piecing of this should you cut off any paper. You should just cut the paper when you cut out the sections that you're going to be sewing up. Last little bit, and then we'll flip it over, and hopefully it looks like half of a heart. And it does. Look at there. Little fuzzies. So what I would do now is take it to an iron and give it a really good press, but there's half of our heart. So now we need to make the other half. You're probably thinking, Bethany, that's the same half. Remember, it does the opposite. So once we do this half, it'll be the other half of this, and it'll be on this side. Okay, so let's go to the other half of this one, and we're gonna do it a little faster and speed it up, but you'll see it's the same steps. We're just going in the other direction, okay? So same rules apply for all foundation paper piecing. So we're gonna start with a blue piece for our B1, and next is B2. So we're going to fold fabric to fabric. And I find it easiest to fold it on the table like this. That's hard for you guys to see, but that's what I typically do. And then we're going to take one of my scrap pieces, lay it over that, do a little test fit, and we're going to go sew that up. All right, so now that I've sewed my line, I'm going to fold it paper to paper and trim off my 1/4 inch seam allowance. There we go. Open my paper, flip it over, and finger press this little triangle open. There we go. Now I'm going to flip it back over, and we're going to do B3. So B3 is right here. Give it a good fabric to fabric fold and a good crease. We're going to take another piece of my scrappy orange from my previous side of my heart, do a little test fit, and we're going to sew from this line to this line. Don't forget to trim your thread tails in between each piece. So now that we've done that one, we're going to fold it paper to paper, trim our seam allowance. You can see how once you get in the groove, and it is a groove, it goes faster. So we're going to fold that up, flip it over, and fold that out. Give it a nice little finger press or take it to the iron. And then the last section we're going to do is B4. So I'm going to flip it over this way. And I'm going to make my crease. Here we go. Just like that. Make a good crease. All right, so there's the crease. I'm going to take this last piece of orange, do a little test fit. That works. I want to sew from here to here for B4. All right, so here's B4. I sewed it on. Now we're going to fold it paper to paper. Use our ruler to trim down our seam allowance. go. Open this back up, flip it over, and there are our 3 seams for our 4 pieces of our other side of our heart. And now we're gonna flip it over and trim off around the edges and clean it up. All right, there is the other half of our heart. So before I go attaching these 2 halves to make our heart, I am going to give it a good press with the iron so I get nice crisp corners, and then we will attach these 2 pieces. All right, so to attach these 2 pieces, we know that they need to go together and look like this when they're done. So we're going to fold them right sides together, or place them right sides together, just like this, so that these points line up here and here. Now, when you are reading the instructions on how to piece your pattern together, it's going to tell you something along the lines of like attaching A plus B, and then you just put them together, right? And they usually will have those here in the side seams so that you know which ones go on which side, because a lot of pieces or a lot of foundation paper piecing will have multiple pieces. This one's really simple because it's just 2 halves and they're mirrored, they're the same. So this one's a pretty obvious one, but as you start doing bigger, more complex pieces, you'll pay attention to how all the different pieces are assembled in the order that they need to be assembled in, so it comes together seamlessly. All right, so we're gonna put these together. Now a little trick, now this one doesn't really super matter, but this is a trick that I will share with you because it will matter as you do more complex pieces. If you take a pen and poke it through the top corner or one of the corners on one side, it should poke through close or pretty close to the corner on the back side. This one's pretty close, so I'm probably going to shift this bottom piece over just a hair so that when I poke through the front, it's close. I don't typically do this. I usually just kind of eyeball it and hope for the best. That's pretty good. What I typically do is use a clip because I find that easier, especially with smaller pieces like this, to be able to line them up. Some people like to use the pin method. For more complicated pieces, I'll definitely use the pin method for bigger pieces. But once I get it lined up and I know it's where I want it to be, I will use a clip to hold it in place. You can use a couple clips. And now what we're going to do is sew from here to here or here to here. Doesn't really matter which way you go. But we're going to back stitch at the beginning and the end. We're not going all the way off the edge here. We're just sewing along this inside line, okay? So the only seams that we've done for both halves is 1, 2, 3. So these 3 seams, and now we're going to join them with a 4th seam here. We're not sewing all the way around the perimeter of this. We don't want to do that. We're just attaching the pieces. They're going to be kind of floppy on the corners, and that's okay. We're just attaching these 2 pieces together down this one side. So let's go do that. One thing to note is I'm still using that same short stitch length. And you'll hear it's a little chunkier over the seams where there's more bulk. And there we go. We're going to trim our thread tails again. And let's open it up. Voila! For eyeballing it, it's a pretty nice point right there. All right, so that is our finished heart. All right, so now that we've finished our heart, I would definitely go give it another press. Some people like to press the seams open along here. I find it a bit challenging, especially when there's all these pieces, but some people like to do that, especially if they're putting a lot together. It can kind of help eliminate some bulk here if they were adding another piece. I typically will just press to one side. That's just personal preference, and it also depends on the how complex the piece is that I'm doing. So now that I've got my piece completed, it's put together. If I were to add this to another heart to make the stacking hearts, I would stop here, go do a whole nother one, and then attach those two hearts together before I remove any of the paper. So this one, I've already removed the paper. See how it's floppy? And this one holds its shape a little better. Keeping the paper on, if you were to attach these two, like if I were to sew these two together so that they were stacked like this, I would want to keep the paper on both as I do that. It helps line up your corners as well. And then once they're stick together or attached together and sewn together, we know that we're done with all of our foundation paper piecing. We're ready to add them into our pocket or our zipper pouch or whatever. Then we can remove the paper, okay? So do all of your foundation paper piecing first, and when you're completely done, then you can remove the paper. So to remove the paper, some people find this to be the most satisfying part. It's really easy. Because we use such a short stitch length, it perforates right off. To get these inside pieces right here, you just kind of have to like fold the fabric and kind of pinch the paper. It comes right off. You want to make sure that you're getting in the seam allowance too, getting that paper off as well. There you go. So there's the back, there's the front, and now we have two hearts. How fun is that? I hope you are loving foundation paper piecing and give it a try. All right, so now that we've mastered foundation paper piecing and just the basics, I want to show you how you can take this little heart that we made and this is a great example of how you can apply what we made and turn it into a project. So this is a little zipper pouch for sunglasses. Super cute. It's padded, so it keeps them safe in your purse or your car. I actually can fit like 2 pairs of glasses in here, which is great. But yeah, so this is how you can take like foundation paper piecing and level it up, a project. Make a project around it if you want. So this was a fun one. This is actually what I taught at the retreat. So there's that. But I want to show you some examples of some bigger projects that I've done. Most of these are going to be Liza Taylor's patterns that I've gotten from her website or from her membership. One is from another person, Pride and Joy Quilting. And then another one is one that I designed myself and made into a little mug rug. So I'm going to show you a few things. Some are small, some are big, some are more elaborate than others. And it kind of gives you an idea of some of the fun stuff you can do. And again, I really feel like this is like sew by numbers, like paint by numbers. Like, it's so fun. And what I love about these, especially in the membership that Liza does, is like this. Some of these that I make, mine will look completely different than everybody else's, even though we're all using the same pattern, because we all choose different fabrics and there's no like right or wrong for that, which is super fun. So this is a strawberry pattern of hers. And this one still has the paper on the back. And I like to leave the paper on the back of this one just so that you guys can see like what it looks like with the paper. So basically I make all of these like different blocks, right? So there was these different sections, like this is one. These two were one block. This was one. Let's see here. This one was by itself. This was one. And then I think this was one. And then so the pattern didn't tell me how to like piece all of this together, but it told me what order to put all the different blocks together to make the strawberry. So this is what it looks on this side. This is what it looks like when you're sewing it up. And when you're done sewing it up, because we use such a small stitch, all of this paper will just like peel off very easily. But I like to keep this one because it's kind of my show and tell. So I leave that one like that. She did a fun one for St. Patty's Day with some Lucky Charms. What am I thinking of? Clover Clover. We'll get there. We'll get there. Anyways, she did a fun Valentine's one where it was 3 different heart patterns. So some months you get more than one pattern, but these were 3 different hearts. So this one was kind of like a log cabin style, and I chose to just do some wonky plaid and have fun with it. And then this one has the star in the middle of the heart. So of course I fussy cut my taco fabrics to say, let's talk about love, which I think is super cute. And then this one was my favorite because I love it when you can do words with foundation paper piecing. So yes, you can do words. You can spell things out with foundation paper piecing. She actually just launched or released an entire alphabet in 2 different sizes. So you could spell anything you want. You could make the cutest little holiday pennant for your fireplace or your mantle or for a kid's birthday party. I think that would be super cute. But anyways, there's the other one that says love you. And then she, for spring, came out with these little gardening tools. How cute are these? I'll hold them up closer. And I sewed them together because they are one day, if I ever finish it, going to become pockets to an apron. So this is the apron cutout. I even have the apron cut out, y'all. All I have to do is sew it up. But these are going to be the pockets on the front of my apron. And the apron is a pinafore apron that is a pattern on her website. So those are going to be super cute, like a little gardening apron. I bought the fabric, I cut it out, I made the pocket FPP. I just have to sew it up. There's the hummingbird, which I absolutely love this one. I think it's so pretty. I want to finish the edges of this one and like really finish it. And I have some frames and I want to frame it and hang it on a wall. I just think it's so beautiful. This was actually the first of her patterns that I did. After doing like a small mug rug off an Etsy pattern that I did with my friends at Sewing Club, this was the first one I did of hers. And I did pretty good. So I was like, I think I've caught the bug. And ever since then, I've been doing her patterns. This one right here is actually one that I designed in the EQ8 software as just learning the software and trying it out for myself. And then I turned it into like a little mug rug. So it's got some fusible fleece in here and I could sit my coffee mug on it, but I made that one. And then this one is from Pride and Joy. It's one of her patterns. It's a bigger piece. So I'm gonna scoot back a little bit. And it's a sewing machine with fabric on it. How cute is that? I love doing these. This one's definitely getting finished and framed. I am really bad about like doing the foundation paper piecing and not turning it into something because this is the part that I love the most. I really should take like all these things that I make and keep turning them into finished projects. But even if I never do, I just have so much fun making those that it's okay. But I hope this tutorial was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new. Please save it if you're getting into foundation paper piecing so that you can reference back to it. Share it with a friend who wants to try to figure out what foundation paper piecing is, or FPP for short. Now there is a version called EPP, which is English paper piecing, which is done by hand, and that is different than foundation paper piecing, which is done with paper and machine like you saw in the tutorial. So there are 2 different types. Some people will do both. Some people prefer one over the other. I prefer foundation paper piecing because it goes by faster. I'm not a big hand sewer, but I've tried it and it's fun and I have friends that love it. So to each their own, but the tutorial today is just on the foundation paper piecing. If you found this helpful, I sure hope so. Please like, comment, subscribe, all those things. If you have a sewing question, don't forget to call the Sewing Help Hotline anytime, 24/7. I'll answer your question. I'll teach a tutorial. I'll walk you through it. If you have questions about machines, it doesn't matter. If I don't know the answer, I know someone in the sewing community who does. So I can phone a friend too if I need to help better answer your question. So don't hesitate to ask, and we'll figure it out together. All right, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll talk to you later. See you next time. Happy sewing. Bye.